Hey, welcome inside the studio. My name is Tyler Bell. I'm the creator of the Westside Fairytales, a monthly horror and dark fiction podcast. I write horror, I like to talk about it, and I figured I'd start making some video reviews based on some stuff I've seen, see if people like that, and just talk about stuff. Today I'm going to be talking about Pet Sematary, the 2019 remake starring Jason Clarke as Dr. Lewis Reed, Amy Seimetz as Rachel Creed, John Lithgow as Judd Crandall, Jette Laurence as Ellie Creed, the daughter, and Hugo and Lucas Lavoie as Gage Creed. And then there's a bunch of other people. But let's just hop right into it. The movie is a remake of a fairly classic, I would say, horror staple, the original 1989 Pet Sematary. That movie is, I feel like, a movie I've seen 100 times, but never all at once. If I had to count, I would say I've sat down through it start to finish twice in my life. But thanks to like AMC, I feel like, and Sci-Fi Channel back when I was a kid, and the late 90s and early 2000s would have that film on almost non-stop, and just kind of like you'd always just be picking up pieces of it here and there. It's a good film. It's flawed in its own way, just like the original 1983 novel by Stephen King is flawed in its own way. Full disclosure, I haven't read Pet Sematary since I was like 14 or 15 years old, so that's about a decade and a half now. But it's still one of those books that really sticks in my head. I think it's just because it's one of the first adult-style horror novels that I've ever read. But I don't really feel like basing a review off of the closeness of this new movie to that book is fair, so I'm going to leave out comparisons to it. I actually had to look up a bunch of stuff that was in this movie just to see if it was actually in the book. As with any Stephen King book, it's not exactly a short, digestible piece of fiction that's just completely stripped of any additional artifice. It is a thick boy. It is a thick boy. Not the thickest boy that he's written. It's an early '80s novel. You didn't get to fool that full Stephen King thickness until about the '90s or so, and then that's when shit just popped off, man. The movie Pet Sematary follows the Creed family, a bunch of Chicago transplants, to, of course, Maine. They're out there living with all the Mainers. They meet their neighbor, Judd Crandall, soon after they move in, and he's just wonderful. He's just a folksy, woodsy guy. he's a widower. He lives alone. He has all sorts of folksy wisdom that he likes to impart. So shortly after moving into the house, the family starts seeing weird things. There's a parade of children wearing extremely professionally made animal masks that are intentionally like to look unprofessional. They've got a very New Orleans like parade float feel to them. It very much made to look like they were kind of cobbled together, but you can tell that they're high quality from a distance. You can tell what the mask is. All the masks fit the kids. So, and this was something I really do remember from the trailers, is this processional of kids. It has no bearing at all on the rest of the plot. And very much this is a problem throughout the entirety of Pet Sematary. The Creed family is boring and almost impossible to care about. I understand that that's kind of like, there might be some sort of conceit that they should be less interesting because they are a family of, just white bread American non-entities. The father is a doctor, a successful enough doctor that he works at a teaching hospital, I think, at a college in Maine somewhere. I don't know. Shortly after they move in, one of his students is just annihilated by a car and dragged to death. A boy named Victor Pascal, who bleeds out of his exposed brain and dies. And really in this scene, you start to get the first bit of clumsiness in the movie. Uh, it's like someone's never even watched a single episode of like ER or Grey's Anatomy, like at least, because you always do that. You check to make sure the person's dead. You know what I mean? Everybody knows that. This is very typical. It's a very typical thing. You see it in any movie, any show. You check the dead body. You hold your fingers over the pulse, and then you say, "Call it. It's time." But he just kind of like goes, "Oh no, he's dead." he uses no instrumentation. He doesn't really even touch the body. He's just looking at the guy, and the guy stops breathing, and he's like, "Oh, he's fucking dead." And that sort of fuck it attitude pervades this film, start to finish. There's a lot of half-assedness that goes into almost all of it. It's kind of functionally depressing at points, because you have Pet Sematary. You could have done anything with it, anything at all. I mean, remake the old movie shot for shot, like that terrible Psycho remake starring real life Psycho guy from Wedding Crashers, Vince Vaughn, whose name I almost completely forgot. Or you can do something crazy, but they decided to just not really do much at all. The thing with the kids and the masks has never really gone into. If it was so fast I didn't even notice it. There's a mask is kind of like haunts the little girl a little bit. She like finds it in places. But other than that, it's a lot of non-starters and just inconsequential. It's just a lot of non-starters and inconsequential leads that turn out to nothing. It's very much Ponzi scheme writing, but with the lightest touch of anything interesting happening. By the end of the movie, you almost have nothing to talk about. You know, it's like the one thing that the writer wanted to do was say, hey, if you've seen the original Pet Sematary, I'm not going to do any of the major plot points the way you expected. Major minor spoiler, the little boy doesn't die. It's the daughter instead. Utterly pointless. And I really think it's just because little girls at that age can maximize their creepiness. Little white girls have extremely straight hair, and they can do the Samara from the Ring, and that is the epitome of horror for most of these like Hollywood. I don't know where they find them. I think there's a box that they get cranked out of like an organ grinder, but that's what they do. You get a creepy girl, and she just comes back from the dead after the dad buries her. And the thing is the good part, what made Pet Sematary good, is the fact that the dad going fucking crazy and knowingly burying his child in this insane graveyard is he knows he's not supposed to do it, but he just gets wrecked with guilt. And I like that part of that book. It's the part of the book I can remember. Like, I will never forget the, hey, ho, let's go. He keeps running over this same thing from the Ramones, the same little bit of line from the Ramones. I think if you want to compare it to the book, the most apt comparison to the quality of the writing and the quality of the execution can be compared in the way that Dr. Creed gets into the graveyard to dig up his deceased child. In the book, it is a scene that I remember because it made me nervous when I read it. To break into the graveyard, he has to crawl over a very tall gate. And it's those spiked, those kind, all over the big wall. And he's worried that he's going to trip and it's going to fucking impale him, and they're going to find him on the wall the next day. He's got to drag all of his shit over there, and at the end of the day, he's got to drag all his fucking kid back over, his dead kid. He's got to drag him back over the wall, and it's a fucking nightmare scene. He's drunk, he's sweaty, he's just struck weak with the grimness of what he's about to do, because he also doesn't really 100% believe in the Pet Sematary at that point. In the movie, he walks up to the fucking knee-high wall and he tosses his shovel over it. And then he's over it. And it's done. And I mean, I know it's just a fucking non-entity scene, but like, I almost feel like somebody put that in there just because they're like, I just want you guys to know how little we give a fuck about this source material. And you don't have to. You can be as just disgrace Stephen King's source material. I don't care. The things that I want to see in these films are just good film things. You know what I mean? I want to see up on the screen the things that made the original novel good. In the case of Pet Sematary, it's not the kind of stretched out and horseshit I like subplot with the wife's like crinkled up sister who's got spinal meningitis and is all twisted and dies in the dumbwaiter. Utterly worthless. Utterly worthless side plot. And the worst part about it is she's never really given any agency as a character anyway. So it's almost like this weird, like, hey, she's more than just a housewife. She watched her daughter die when her sister die when she was younger. And there's a few nightmare scenes, but all of that could be completely ignored. Completely ignored. Because it doesn't really serve the main plot point. The main plot point should be someone loses their child and then uses black magic to bring the child back, and then the child's fucking crazy and kills everybody. That's all three acts. That's all three acts. You know what I mean? But they spend so much time, so many moments setting up this and that and this and that that are just completely useless. I don't care that the little girl doesn't feel close to the kids at school because she's gonna fucking die and turn into a demon and not even kill any of those kids. You know what I mean? I don't care about the wife's trauma with the sister because she is fucking gone for the entire time he's mulling over digging his daughter up out of the grave. I like John Lithgow, and I like the cat. The cat's great. There's like a million cats, I think. There's 4 cats. I got it up on the screen here. It's Leo, Tonic, Jagger, and JD as Church the cat. In order, my favorite people in this show are John Lithgow, Leo, Tonic, Jagger, and JD. Every other actor falls behind them. And I don't know if it's really their fault. I feel like I've seen Amy Seimetz in something else. Jason Clarke is terrible. I'm sorry, Jason, if you end up seeing this. I don't hold it against you, but your Australian accent is fucking nightmarishly thick. And do you see how much my jaw moves? This is how you make all the sounds for an American to talk. When you talk like this, as an Australian, you know, you got these. So he's talking through his little small mouth because he's got whatever sort of Australian accent that he has, and he's trying to talk like an American all the time. It just does. It doesn't work. And the thing is it doesn't have to. He's probably a great actor. The entire conceit of the movie is that he's coming from Chicago to go to Maine to be a doctor. He could have been an Australian doctor living in Chicago that moved to Maine. And then he could have just acted his fucking heart out with his Australian accent, and I would have never cared. The only thing you have to do is you have to set all of Stephen King's shit in Maine, because he forced everyone to do that, which I fucking 100% agree with, because, like, dude, get your plate. I'm so sick. I will actively turn off stuff that's set in LA or New York because I'm done. I have setting fatigue. I don't give a fuck about New York City. I'm sorry if you live there. I don't care. It's great. I've visited. I've been to Hell's Kitchen. It's weak level hipster shit. Too expensive. Your beer's not good enough for the prices that you charge. Broadway's amazing. I love Broadway. I saw Book of Mormon and I saw Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Great. Love it. Don't care about movies set in New York anymore. They did all the good ones in the 60s through the 80s, some in the 90s. Everything else, it's just terrible. I'm done. LA, same thing. La La Land, eat shit. I digress. The point I really need to drive home is that there is an overwhelming sense of I don't give a fuck throughout this movie. Like, almost like they're not even rushing, but kind of just dragging themselves from scene to scene. and it ultimately just doesn't work. And by the time you get to the good parts, you just don't care. And they don't really have a lot of time to dwell on them either. The movie's an hour and 40 minutes long, and in an hour and 40 minutes, they accomplish very little in terms of developing any of the characters. Dr. Lewis Creed, from start to finish, is the exact same guy, only just a little sadder, and by the end, a little more dead. The wife, nothing is resolved. The wife leaves. The wife arrives. Her kid dies. She leaves with the other kid and then brings the first kid back. The most you ever learn is that maybe having a cat is not the best kind of pet, and that's what we learn. That is the summation in whole of Pet Sematary 2019. I had almost no hopes for this movie. I was not let down because I didn't think it was going to be good. Stephen King adaptations almost never are. It's rare for you to get a good Stephen King adaptation, and I don't know why. There's just some that work and they shouldn't, and there's some that don't and they do. My favorite two Stephen King adaptations that are actually have something to do or are pretty close to the original story would probably be Maximum Overdrive, which I love and no one else likes. It's Stephen King's directorial debut. It's a piece of shit. Don't get me wrong. Don't watch it and think you're gonna watch a good movie. But it's fun. And that's the most important thing, is it's a blast. The other one that I really like is The Night Flyer, which is about a vampire who travels around on in a Cessna single prop airplane and kills people. And the inside of his airplane is disgusting. He's got like one gross tooth instead of like multiple teeth. And at one point, there's a scene where a guy hears somebody peeing in the restroom. And he looks in the mirror, and because the dude's a vampire, you can't see him, but you can see his bloody pee going into the toilet, which is that's great. That's what I need. I need that. Or I need some Kubrick shit. You have your two sides. You can go Kubrick, or you can go Invisible Man urinating blood. Those are my two extremes, and everything that's in the middle is fucking wishy-washy as far as I'm concerned. I just don't feel it. Ultimately, my final thoughts on Pet Sematary 2019 are avoid it. Don't give it any money, and don't believe anybody that says it's worth a watch. In my opinion, and I'll get into my rating scale that's going to be overly complex that I'm going to use for these videos. So I think that every horror movies in general need to be judged by different standards than normal movies do. You know, production values are sort of inconsequential. Enjoyability is very important to me. So for this movie, I would say its production value is probably like 7. In general, the shots are boring, but they're competent. Everything's in focus, at least. The lighting is extraordinarily boring. Dawson's Creek lighting for most of the day. I can almost feel the closeness of the reflecting screen that they use to illuminate characters' faces while they're in the woods. Never use bright, wonderful, full-faced light in the woods in a horror movie. They're the fucking woods. Be scary. It's the fucking woods, man. Dark shadows, thick, heavy leaves on the face. That's my shit. I don't give a fuck what the actors look like. I need lighting for blood. Lighting is for blood. Otherwise, put shit in shadows. That's the point. That's the point. It's a horror movie. But in general, shit flowed. The narrative arc existed. It was boring. It was banal. It was a wet fart of an ending. But hey, man, competency-wise, a 7. Enjoyability-wise, 2. I would say maybe a 3, probably a 2. It was just not fun. It's not a fun movie. It doesn't make you think. It didn't scare me. Anybody that gets scared by this movie, this is welcome to the horror realm. I appreciate this is your first horror movie. I am glad that you're here. There are plenty of other ones. Watch the original Pet Sematary. It's much creepier. And then ultimately my final thing that I think you should have in any horror review is it horror, actually? So I would say on that is on a scale of 1 to 5, or 0 to 5, how much of a horror movie is it? With something like Hellraiser being flat out a 5, something like Shutter Island being right around maybe a 2, and then something like Parasite being a 0. This is a horror movie. I would say, as far as how into the genre it is, I would say a flat 5. We have presence of demons. We have reanimated corpses. There are nightmares about exposed brain former patients. It's fully a horror movie. Very much a horror movie. Almost competently made and not enjoyable at all. Not fun. I would say my ultimate recommendation is to avoid the Pet Sematary remake. It's not even fun if you're drunk, which is the saddest thing you can say about a horror movie. Not even fun. Not even fun if you're drunk. With that, that's the end of the review. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to do more of these. I am not going to put up a very nice camera, I don't think, unless this gets successful. This is about the amount of work I plan on doing for these. If you want to know more about me, if you want to see if I've got my own chops, I'm out here talking shit. Hey Tyler, can you fucking deliver? Are you the fucking pizza boy with this horror shit? Hey, come at me, bro. WestsideFairytales.com. You can listen to every episode of the podcast there. You can find us on any podcatcher online. It's free to listen. You can listen to it whenever. I'm on Patreon too. If you like this conversation about Pet Sematary, I also have a thing called the Horror and Lit Club, which is part of the podcast in which I talk about the monthly recommendations that I do for random horror movies, video games, and other sort of basic horror media, because there's some things that are horror and you're just like, I don't know what this is, but it's fucking scary. I'll probably do a haunted house review on that motherfucker at some point. I don't give a shit. Catch up with me. Say hello. If you fucking hate everything I had to say, if you hate even just a little bit, if you think I'm wrong, tell me down there in the comments, man. I'll have a conversation with you. I don't mind. These are all just my opinions too, by the way. If you enjoyed Pet Sematary, hey, if you love it, if you hate it, how would you rate it? Shout out to fucking Melon. Let me know. Talk to me. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm right. Much love, and until next time, as always, stay safe out there.